One of the techniques that I've heard many people doing when they're prompting their LLMs or Claude Code is to add a prefix such as "you are a senior engineer" to do a little bit of role playing so that the LLM can actually think a little bit better and be smarter. But I've never actually seen tests to verify if that actually improves the output of the code or the designs, or if that's just a bunch of extra noise that confuses the LLM. So that's exactly what I decided to do. I created an experiment to test 5 different features that I'm going to add into an existing code base. 5 of them do not have the prefix "you are a senior engineer," but the other 5 do have that prefix. And then after building out all these separately in different work trees without having any skills set up, I have a Fable 5 agent going through and reviewing all the code and rating it from 1 to 50 to determine which one is actually the most senior engineer type of code. So by the end of this video, we will learn 3 new things. The first thing we will learn is adding this prefix. Is it actually useful or is it a waste of your time? The second thing we'll learn is when adding it, what in the code actually changes or improves versus when not adding it. And the third thing you will learn are the skills that I use that actually force these agents to think harder, audit better, and create actual senior level code. So one of the key things of this experiment is I wanted to run these on real code bases. I didn't want to just spin off a little side project or have it build something from scratch. I wanted to see how well it can add in features to an existing code base because honestly, that is where you're going to be using these agents the most. Most of the things you see on Twitter and YouTube with people building something from scratch, you don't do that in the real life workforce, okay? And the experiment is like this. We're going to ask Fable 5 to think of 5 new features to add to the code base. I am going to keep the features somewhat small, but not too small that it's kind of a pointless test. So basically, I have 5 different prompts to add in new features to a code base. And then I prompted it to create 15 isolated work trees. Now, the reason I have 15 is because there's also a third test I'm doing, which I'll share at the end using my own skills. But I want to kind of focus right now on the baseline and the senior engineer prefix and how it kind of works. Okay, so for every single thing that Claude Code worked on, I told it to create a separate isolated work tree, spin up a Claude Code instance, do not load any skills. There's actually a flag you can provide to Claude Code to not use any skills. It's called disable/commands. I told it to use Opus 4.8 with effort extra high. Obviously, if I used Fable, it would have burned through my entire 20x max plan. So I need to actually get this experiment done because this is a lot of things running at once. So again, I used headless Claude Code instances in parallel. I didn't want it to use any of my built-in memory systems or anything else. Just use Claude Code headless, run the prompt, and see how it does. Now, each instance that's running does self-verify a little bit. So it does run some test suites. It runs the linters. It does run a production build to make sure that the code that it added in isn't completely broken, but I didn't have it run full end-to-end tests or anything like that, right? So just an initial run through to make sure that the code seems like it's pretty good. And then I told it to commit and open some pull requests. But the important part is the blind judging by a stronger model. So the implementation and the planning for each feature was done with Opus 4.8. But at the end, I told Fable 5 to go through every single pull request and grade it based on various technical analysis of coding. Is it decoupled? Is it secure? Does it seem like it works? And then I had it generate an entire report for me that we're going to show in this video just in a second to see which one performed the best. Now, some things I do want to point out is that they all started with the same base commit. It's good to have a starting point so that the test in the experiment is repeatable. We made sure that we use Opus 4.8 with effort extra high for everything. The same prompt for every single request, just with that little prefix in front. Isolated work trees, like I mentioned, headless, one shot, no skills, one judge, one rubric. So I tried to keep this as fair as possible, but you guys can leave in a comment below if there's a better way I should have ran this experiment. Let's also look at how I actually prompted Claude Code to run the testing scenario. I didn't have to code anything. I let Claude Code figure this all out. The first thing I did was I asked it to look over my code base and give me 5 smaller size features that are at least worth running this experiment over. And it gave me the 5 that it thought were good. So pre-run estimate costs, which is basically how much will stuff estimate the cost before I run it in this application I showed. This one honestly is a very low effort, easy. I think any model could probably do this perfectly fine. A notification system so that when runs finish, I can get a notification and maybe even a bell icon I can click to get a drop down of all those finished things. Run tags and labels. So this one's a little bit larger. This is a feature that adds tags to all my runs so that later on I can go and filter and search for them if I need to. And then finally, the last feature is a one-click run again feature. So after you run a job, let's say you want to kick it off again, click a button, does that properly hook into all the existing systems and code modules to kick off that run for a final time? Make sure you do these in separate work trees. Do not ask me any questions while you do this. I've noticed that sometimes when you run these experiments, the model will try to get user feedback, and then it kind of breaks the experiment because obviously I'm not sitting here giving different answers to the different models because that would definitely throw off the results. Do not use any skills. And then at the very end, I told it to basically review the changes using Fable 5, okay? So that's the setup. That's how I kind of got the whole test scenario set up. You can use Claude Code to do most of anything that you can imagine. So your lack of creativity is honestly going to be the gatekeeper for you to become very excellent at these tools. If you can imagine it, you should probably just prompt it in the Claude Code because it could probably figure it out for you and build out a testing scenario and suite better. Now, the reason I picked Fable 5 for the whole orchestration is because it's much better at doing these type of things. And keep track of all the different experiments. It's making sure that it's running them properly and consistently. And then I kicked off the 4.8 workers just to try to save on a little bit of cost. Okay, so what is the actual outcome of this experiment? Is it worth adding that prefix, think like a senior engineer, or you are a senior engineer? We're gonna find out right now. So let's go over to the results. All right, so here are the output results. So basically we have the baseline, which is gonna be in the blue. This is the run or the test suite that did not have the prefix, you are a senior engineer. And then we have the green, which is adding that prefix in. Now, after the 5 runs, Fable 5 judged these. And you can see here, the green is actually a little bit lower on most of these runs. The green is the one with having the prefix. And the run tags feature did very poorly. I think it actually had 2 bugs or 2 crashes that happened. The per run cost also performed the very worst at the very end. And kind of the blue ones, the baseline actually was more higher at the top. If you were to draw an imaginary line halfway through, it looks like there's more green at the bottom than there are blue, which is pretty interesting because I thought actually using this prefix could potentially make the scoring be a little bit higher. Maybe it could trigger the LM to think a little bit harder, but I guess its idea of a senior engineer probably adds a bunch of noise. So let's go down and read through why some of the baseline wins. So the one-click rerun, both endpoints are near identical and correct, but it says the test decided baseline proved the 2 properties that define the feature. The profile drift test shows that the frozen plan wins over the mutated runner profile, and a concurrently capped test showed admission gates reapply. But of course, there's other features where it marked that the senior prefix actually won. So it could actually be the case that in some scenarios, some features do perform better adding in the prefix. But of course, we're dealing with non-deterministic LLMs. So overall, is it safe to say that this is a clear do not add the prefix? Probably not. As you can see here, the run notifications got 3 points higher than over here, the run notifications. So at the end of the day, is this statistically significant to say that, hey, adding this prefix is actually useful or not? I would probably say no. I would need to add a bunch more features, a bunch more experiments, try doing some with bug fixes, and also try just doing reruns, right? These are non-deterministic machines, so rerunning them a couple times could give us a better average, and maybe all this is actually kind of pointless. Which leads me to, how do I actually make these LLMs perform better? Because if adding a prefix to the run doesn't really do much, what is the approach? And honestly, the approach is to spend more tokens and to have these LLMs re-audit the code that it writes. So this is where I'm going to show you the skills that I typically use in my day-to-day coding job at work, and also my side projects. I don't want to have to come back and fix the bugs of the LLMs. I want to be able to prompt it once and come back when it's done and have certainty that it actually works. So I do have my own set of skills. If you go to agentsystem.dev/skills, these are free open source to use. But what these skills do is based on what the request is inside your code base, like if you're adding a feature or removing a feature, it's going to basically conditionally run a different set of checks and audits. Especially if you were to change, for example, backend code, you might have more security audits that kick in automatically. If you're changing front-end code, you're going to have accessibility audits that kick in. You're going to have Pally audits kick in to make sure that the front end is actually accessible. But from running this experiment with the skills versus the baseline, you can tell clearly that using these skills, it comes out on top every single time. This is one in every single of those 5 features, and they score significantly higher in many of the different categories from the baseline and the ones with the senior engineer skills. Okay, so scrolling down, you can see the full ranking here. Every single time I use the ship skills, the Fable 5 judge ranked it as the best versus the baseline and the senior. Obviously, they aren't as performing as well. Now, granted, I think the reason why these are performing better is because I'm using more tokens. I'm telling these LLMs to spend more time, think through everything, re-review everything multiple times until the output is actually senior level, right? Until it's actually really good code, it's clean, it's decoupled, it doesn't have security issues. And you can see that through some of these features like the per cost run, it was actually cheaper than the senior prefix for some reason. I don't really know why. I would think that this one would have been much more expensive. But like I mentioned, we're non-deterministic machines. You never know what run is going to do, how the caching kind of adds up. For the search and filter, also, it was cheaper as well than the baseline. Notifications cost almost twice as much, and I would understand why. Notifications is a larger feature. It has more complexity, which means that more of my audits would probably have kicked in to make sure that notifications aren't accidentally going to the wrong people, etc. The run tags by far is the biggest feature that we asked to add in, which caused almost a 3 times increase in how much this thing used in terms of tokens, right? So overall, using the ship skills do increase the overall expense by 81%, which to many people watching this might be like, well, that's just a giant waste of tokens. In my opinion, the better intelligence and quality you can get from these coding agents, it's worth the extra spend, because for every bug that you have in your code base, you end up spending more time going back and manually verifying it, going back and reprompting the agent to fix the stuff that it messed up on, and then you just keep on doing that loop over and over again. And those costs add up as well. We just don't really track them as well, right? We typically will run something and we'll go back and look at the usage, but do you ever go back and actually track after fixing it and reprompting it and making sure it's good, how much money is being spent overall versus just a one prompt to get it completely done, okay? Now, with all that being said, I do recommend to take this with a grain of salt. You may get better results using your own set of skills. You may get better results just by adding a couple of extra keywords. And that is the thing that we need to start doing in this industry. We need to run more evals. We need to really understand how to make these models output the best high quality code as possible, so that we're not just blindly installing skills without any validation or evals to say that they actually do what they're supposed to do. All right, that's about it. If you guys want to go check out my Agentic Jumpstart course, I have a course with over 13 hours of content teaching everything I've learned along the way. I am going to go through and revamp this course. I made this course at the end of last year, and since then, I mean, like tons of new models have come out, new features have been released in the Claude code. So I want to do a revamp on this. But if you do purchase now, I will be increasing the price when I get this revamp completely done. So it is at a lower price right now. Other than that, if you guys enjoyed, leave a comment. Have a good day and happy prompting.